Randumb Rants. Like and subscribe. Today we're doing a classic episode rant. I know y'all remember. Wayans Brothers. Season 4, episode 19. Talk is cheap. Okay? Classic episode. And before we even go there though, right? I have to talk about the WB Spring 97 lineup, okay? I know some people may or may not know. I know my subscribers, they probably already hip, right? But it was at one point, Warner Brothers had a channel, and they had a mean spring lineup, okay? I don't know if you guys remember the promotion for it. They had Jack A singing throughout the whole commercial. Did you get the word, baby? Tell me, have you heard about the stuff they got on WB? Y'all don't remember that? I don't remember that. That was so classic to me growing up. I tell you what, though. Rants found that on YouTube, though, right? So I will be providing the link to that commercial in the description, right? But nonetheless, though, right? The lineup was crazy. Okay? Shows like the Steve Harvey Show, classic. We're going to talk about all of these sitcoms eventually, right? Sister Sister, another classic, right? Smart Guy, come on now, Smart Guy. The Jamie Foxx Show, classic, right? The Parenthood, I know you remember that. The Parenthood, right? And of course, the Wayans Brothers, right? And to talk about anything good, we have to talk about the downfall, right? And that's where we gotta include this guy right here. You guys see him. Familiar face, right? That's Gerald Norman Springer. Okay? But we're gonna call him Jerry. Okay, because that's what he liked to be called. Rest in peace to Jerry Springer, right? This isn't a bash. We're not about to bash Jerry. But we're going to call it like it is, right? Jerry Springer had a talk show, okay? And the thing about talk shows, see, you don't have to pay Kyle from Ohio a lot to come on and share his story on your talk show, right? His price isn't going to be as much as Denzel Washington's, right? And Jerry knew this, with his talk show, right? And Jerry being aware that these talk shows can be manipulated with the right script, and that actually explains why Jerry was so witty on the show. You guys remember, right? Jerry may ask two men that just got finished scuffling on the show, hey, are you surprised at your wife? And then the guy responds, she slept with my son. Wouldn't you? And then Jerry responds, well, I wouldn't sleep with your son. And the crowd says, Jerry. Yeah, those were scripted jokes to put Jerry on top. Just like any other show, just like a Jay Leno, just like a Letterman, just like a Johnny Carson. Come on now. And let's talk about Jerry's formula, right? Now, Jerry would put people on his show. Doesn't matter, you could be black, white, Spanish, but you had to be lower class. That was the only requirement, right? You couldn't even be a step below middle class, right? You had to represent poverty and ignorance for your selected race, right? This is a fact. It's a fact. We're just going to call it like it is, right? And you would have to fight the person you flew out to Chicago with. This is how it went, right? And Steve and the crew, they're going to break it up. And these fights were entertaining to us, okay? But all of this birthed reality TV. Yes, I don't care if you watch Survivor, Big Brother, Flavor of Love, I Love New York, even Bad Girls Club, and anything on the Zeus Network today. And I know what you're thinking. Right? I know what you're thinking. Well, Rants, you forgot about the Real World. That started reality TV. Hence the name, Real World. Well, let me tell you something, know-it-all. Because Rants know everything too, right? But let me tell you something, okay? Yeah, that was the first show. But that show really wasn't scripted. See, it's a reason why you don't see Real World today. But they have a channel dedicated to trash brain rot reality TV, right? Right? The Zeus Network, right? Do they not? But you don't see the Real World at all. You haven't seen the Real World in the last, 10 years, right? Yeah, well, all that is thanks to this man, Jerry Springer. Okay? And now that you got that intro, I think we can start from the beginning of this show, because now everything will make sense now, okay? Because I feel like I took you back to 1997, right? And we see Marlon, he's cleaning up. He's hiding stuff behind the pillows. He's sweeping dust underneath the rug. And his big brother Shawn, of course, he's in the bathroom. He's getting ready for the day. Now Marlon is telling Shawn while he's in the bathroom, that his new girlfriend is stopping by to visit him. And Shawn just got back from the gym. And Marlon's telling him, when Jasmine comes over, be on your best behavior. And Shawn's telling Marlon, oh, so you really like her, huh? And Marlon says, yes, I'm telling you, she's probably going to be the future ex-Miss Williams. She's fine, Shawn, and she's perfect for me. Plus, she doesn't have any hair on her chin. And Shawn says, good. At least you're moving up the ladder, because the last girl you was with looked like Eddie Griffin. And Marlon says, Shawn, when she gets here, I don't want you being your normal, charming, cute self. You may tempt her. And Shawn walks out and says, come on now, what can I do to tempt her? With his black tank top and sweats, looking like he about to play in a pickup game at the YMCA, right? And Shawn's brushing his teeth, and Marlon sees Shawn, and he's like, what's wrong with you, man? Put some clothes on. This ain't Chippendales. And Shawn says, this is what I always wear to the gym. And Marlon says, come on, man, you got all that extra baby oil on? Put a hoodie on or something. And Shawn says, what? You think I really look that good? And Marlon says, I'll tap if I was a female, of course. And then the door rings, right? And Marlon tells Shawn, okay, well, act gay. And Shawn's like, huh? And then Marlon opens the door, and it's Jasmine, Marlon's new boo, right? And they're doing a whole baby talk thing. They kiss each other. They tell each other they miss each other, right? And Shawn is there jealous, of course. And Jasmine walks over to Shawn and says, oh, Marlon, this must be your big brother. And Marlon says, he's not big. He just wear really tight panty drawers. And Shawn says, ha, ha, ha. She meant older brother. And they introduce themselves to each other. And Jasmine says, it's a pleasure to meet you. I support your lifestyle on behalf of women everywhere. It's a real shame. And granted, she hasn't looked back at Marlon since she laid eyes on Shawn. And Shawn is confused. He's like, what's a shame? And Jasmine says, well, that you're gay. And Shawn says, what? I ain't gay. And Jasmine says, well, Marlon said you were. And Marlon tries to cover it up. He's like, well, she's tripping. I ain't say he was gay. No, I said he was going gray. Then he pulls a hair out of Shawn's face. And he's like, of course that makes Shawn mad, right? And Marlon's like, look, I'm sorry. It was a gray. I don't want you looking like that girl from Josie and the Pussycats. And then he pulls Shawn to the side and says, look, she's a sweet girl. She just had a crazy earwax problem. She can barely hear. She's going deaf, actually. I stuck my tongue in her ear the other day, and it tastes like a battery. And Shawn is like, all right, well, let me just straighten all this out right now. I'm not gay. Don't let the 2 earrings fool you. And Jasmine openly flirts with Shawn. She's like, oh, well, it's really a pleasure to meet you. And gives him that eye. And she won't let go of Shawn's hand. He's telling her, well, I'm about to take a shower. I'm going to need my hand back. And Marlon's like, hey, boo, pumpkin. And Jasmine is so fascinated with Shawn. She eventually turns around and says to Marlon, oh, I'm sorry, did you say something? Carrie and Marlon, of course, right? And now we see Marlon, he's walking in Pop's diner with that fresh Hilfiger coat, right? And Shawn sees him, he's like, hey, what's up, baby boy? And daps him. But Marlon pushes him on a hug, that's included with the dap, and says, you know what the deal is. And Shawn says, well, what's wrong with you? And Marlon says, don't give me that, what's wrong with you? I seen you flirting with Jasmine last night, saying all those sexy words to her. And Shawn, he got his trademark see-through sweater on, right? Shawn was known to wear these, right? Like he was going to a gay rave back in the day, right? But anyways, Shawn says, what? I only told her I was going to take a shower. And Marlon says, yeah, well, immediately when you said that, she pictured you all butt naked and soapy with your nipples percolating. And Shawn says, you're crazy, man. And Marlon says, well, that's the way I pictured you. And Shawn says, man, you're bugging out, kid. And Marlon, I'm your brother. I'll never do anything to ruin you and Jasmine's relationship. And Marlon says, yeah, I guess I am bugging. I don't know what it is, but when I get around Jasmine, I get so jealous. I just want to tie her up and dig a hole and throw her in it and keep her there, just like in Silence of the Lambs. It's lotion in the bucket, Clarice. And naturally, Shawn is thrown off, right? But he asks him anyway, so are we cool? And Marlon says, yeah, we straight and daps him up. And then, Marlon's like, look, I got to go to an audition. I'm about to do Roots on Ice and whatnot, right? And as Marlon is leaving, we see he has the Jordan 13s on, right? Yeah, Marlon is one of them ones when it comes to the 90s sitcoms, right? And don't worry, we're going to do a top sneakerhead character eventually. I promise you guys that we will be doing that, right? But now we see Shawn is at the newsstand, right? And Jasmine walks in and asks if Marlon was around. And Shawn says, oh, no, you missed him. He went out for his audition, for Roots on Ice. And Jasmine says, oh, well, when is he going to be back? And remember, this is the late 90s, right? So Marlon is fresh, but he doesn't have a cell phone. It's not really a big requirement at this time, And correct me in the comments. I could be wrong. I know y'all love doing that. Rants, I had a Nokia in 96. Like how am I supposed to know that information about you? How am I supposed to know that about you? Yeah, but anyway, Shawn says, oh yeah, well, he'll be back in a couple hours. And Jasmine says, oh no, I lost my key and I can't get into my apartment. I don't know what to do. But see, whole time she's setting Shawn up to put that thing on him. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, right? The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. There's a song on there called Doo-Wop, okay? It's a classic song in Negro culture, okay? Lauryn Hill references the same thing that I'm referencing right now, okay? And Shawn can't take a hint. Oh, but he want to see what she can take, though, right? And Shawn says, well, I can help you. Do you have a fire escape? I can climb up there if you don't mind me breaking into your window. And Jasmine says, oh, no. I wouldn't mind you breaking in anywhere, right? And now we're back in the boys' apartment, right? And Shawn is arriving home, from getting the draws, of course, right? And Marlon says, hey, what happened? I stopped by the newsstand, when I was done with my audition. I didn't see you. And Shawn is lying. He's telling Marlon, oh, yeah, I was meeting with a lady by the name of Miss Pringle. She's a distributor. After he looks at the chips, of course, right? And Marlon asks, well, how did it go? And Shawn says, oh, it was good, referring to the draws, of course, right? And Marlon says, hey, you smell like the expensive perfume that I got for Jasmine at the 99-cent store. And Shawn says, really? Well, anyway, what you all dressed up for, Marlon? Changing the subject, of course, right? And Marlon says, oh, I got a date with Jasmine. I'm going to take her down LSK. And Shawn says, well, Marlon, LSK's a lesbian spot. And Marlon says, I know. I don't have to worry about guys there. And Shawn says, well, you don't have to worry about girls. And Marlon's like, oh, I didn't even think of that. But as we can see, right, Jasmine is living very foul. She just dabbled with Shawn. And now she's about to go out with Marlon, right? And Shawn says, oh, well, you should take Jasmine out to the Red Coach. If you really want to impress her, she would love it. And Marlon says, the Red Coach, that's expensive. I don't have that kind of money. Even though I'm always fly, wearing the latest Jordans, rocking the latest designer Coach, you usually see me hell figure down. And I'm paying half of New York City rent, right? But he doesn't have that money. Mind you, Marlon doesn't even do drugs. We already talked about that. That one time that he did do the drugs, his joint was laced. It was a twat joint, right? But anyway, getting back on topic. So Marlon tells Shawn he's about to leave, and Shawn stops him and tells him to have fun and gives him $100 in 1997. So, of course, that's equivalent to $209 today, right? And Shawn feels like, this is the least he can do, right? He literally just powerbombed Jasmine 35 minutes ago. Right? Like he just power slammed suplex Jasmine, 35 minutes ago, right? It wasn't even an hour, right? And Marlon says, wow, $100? Shawn, thanks, bruh. Like, I don't think Jasmine is going to let me pay. But if she does, then I'm good. And Shawn says, look, That's for you. Have fun. And Marlon thanks him and daps him and hugs him, of course. And Shawn says, yeah, we're brothers. We're supposed to share. And Marlon says, yeah, what's mine is yours, right? And walks out. And this leaves Shawn looking crazy because, he just gave away some rent money due to a 304, who let him crash, right? And now we go back to the newsstand, right? And Dee is reading something. She says, oh, no, I don't believe it. And Shawn says, what's that, Dee? A marriage proposal from your prison pen pal? And Dee says, oh my God. And Pop says, I told you, sooner or later he was going to get out of jail and see what you really look like. Talking about you half Indian. And Dee says, no, Jerry Springer is using one of my ideas for the theme of his show. And he's flying me and a guest out to Chicago. And Dee adds on, I was inspired by you two. The theme of the show is called Brotherly Love. And guess what? I submitted your names to be on the show. And Shawn says, hell no, Dee, I'm not going on Jerry Springer making a fool of myself. And Marlon says, I'll do it. And Shawn says, well, you can. I'm not. I seen that show before. I'm not going to have no transvestite running up to me saying, I hate you. I hate you. Hold my earrings. Hold my earrings. And Dee says, well, I want to go to Chicago. And Marlon, who works in TV, of course, and understands the business side of it, he says, come on, Shawn, this would be great exposure for me. And Pop say, oh, forget about Jerry Springer. I want to meet Oprah. She's worth millions. And Stedman can't hit it like no damn jackrabbit. Bang, 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 bang. And Marlon tells Shawn, come on, man, I can't do it without you. And Dee wants to go too, of course. And Shawn says, all right, me and you on Jerry Springer, what could really go wrong, right? And now we see the Jerry Springer show titled Brotherly Love, right? And we meet two brothers, Lester and Dexter. And Jerry asks Lester, why does he think his brother is jealous of him, right? And Lester gets up and says, well, it's obvious. I'm the sexy one. And Dexter says, you tripping, man. Why was I voted Mr. Federal Express? Then the crowd goes, ooh. And Lester stands back up and says, that's all right. Light-skinned brothers will make a comeback, which was a popular 90s joke, right? And Dexter, corny ass, replies back, oh, well, tell that to Kid from Kid and Play, and gets no crowd reaction, right? And we see Marlon and Shawn is backstage watching the show, and Shawn says, you realize how ignorant these people look? And Lester says, look, I got the better car, I got the better job, and I definitely got the better girl. Then he walks over to Jerry and shows him a photo, and Jerry says, whoa. Well, they say a pic is worth 1,000 words, and here are 4 words. She is a fox. And Dexter says, and here's 4 more. She's a 304 too. And that comment causes Lester to do a dive on his brother Dexter and put pause on that man. See, thankfully, I've already explained the Jerry Springer formula by now, but the crowd is yelling, Jerry, 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 Jerry. And Jerry sends the show into commercial. And now we're back on Marlon and Shawn, right? They're still backstage, and Shawn tells Marlon, please promise me you won't act ignorant on this show. And Marlon says, I'm not. And Shawn says, all right, well, it's time for us to show America Brian Gumble ain't the only articulate brother on TV. And Marlon says, look, I didn't even know he was black. And Jerry introduces Shawn and Marlon Williams, and they come out Raising the Roof, which is an old 90s dance, right? Some things don't age well, and this was one of them, right? And Pop stand up proudly said, hey, those are my boys up there. Those my boys. Yeah, those my boys up there. And Jerry say, yeah, we get the point. Have a seat. And we also see my man right behind Pops with a Peyton Manning college jersey, the Tennessee jersey, right? Rants love a good jersey, but that's neither here nor there, right? And Jerry says, now, Marlon, welcome to the show. And Marlon says, thank you, Jerry. Thanks for having us. My favorite show was when the transvestite was pregnant with that little person. That was my favorite. And the crowd cheers, of course, saying, Jerry, Jerry, Jerry. And Jerry says, well, your friends tell us that you two are extremely close brothers. And Dee stands up and says, that was me, Jerry, Dee Baxter, single black woman. And Jerry says, thank you very much, single black woman. And Jerry says, so, are you guys very tight? And Shawn says, tight ain't the word. We're tighter than Garth Brooks' jeans. And the thing about it, Jerry, is that we spend so much time together, we basically know everything about each other. And Jerry says, well, let's see. Marlon, what is Shawn's favorite food, favorite car, and his biggest fear? And Marlon says lasagna, black Porsche Carrera, and one day he grow up and dress tacky like Pops. And of course Pops is offended, but the crowd cheers, and Jerry says, okay, that's right. That's exactly what the card says. Now, Shawn, what is Marlon's favorite color, favorite movie, and ultimate goal in life? And Shawn says, that's easy. Blue. Bout it. And he has no goals. And Jerry says, yep, that's right. And the crowd cheers, and Marlon says, yeah, Jerry, we have no secrets. I would never tell anybody Shawn's nickname with the ladies is Minute Man. And Shawn says, yeah, well, and I will never tell anyone that Marlon's head is lopsided. And Marlon says, that's not funny. You know Pops dropped me because he drank too much. And the crowd cheers, and Pops, of course, is embarrassed again. And Jerry says, well, that's great, but even the closest brothers have a few secrets. And they both say, not us. And Jerry says, well, I tell you what, Shawn, why don't you tell us where you was last Tuesday? And Marlon says, oh, I know where he was. He was at a meeting with Miss Pringle, right? And he's lying, of course. He's agreeing, right? And Jerry says, what else did you do that Tuesday? Because our staff did a little research, and we found someone to help jog your memory. And here's Marlon's girlfriend, Jasmine. And Jasmine comes out, right? And Marlon kisses this wild girl in the mouth. And she sits in between them, right? And Marlon says, baby, what you doing on here? Wait, you came on here to tell me you really a man? Damn, this is the second time this happened. Then he check her Adam's apple, right? And Jerry says, well, we flew Jasmine out, to shed a little light on Shawn's whereabouts last Tuesday. And Marlon says, well, how would she know where Shawn was and what? And Jasmine says, well, Shawn was at my apartment. And Marlon says, what? You told me you had a meeting with a distributor. And Jerry jumps right on in with that witty one-liner and says, well, it looks like she was distributing to your brother. And the crowd goes, ooh, Jerry. And Shawn says, Marlon, it ain't what you think. I was in and out. And the crowd takes that the wrong way, right? And Marlon says, what you mean? So you tapped that before I did? And D yells from the crowd, why did you lie about it, Shawn? And Marlon repeats D but mocks her like, yeah, why did you lie about it, Shawn? And Shawn mocks both of them, because I knew you would get jealous, Marlon. And Marlon says, come on, don't give me that. You know I don't get jealous. Then he stands up and say, hey, Jerry, man, I see how you been looking at my girl. Don't make me come down there and put my foot in your behind. All right, I love your show, but I'll scrap you down. And Shawn says, see what I'm talking about, Orenthal? You're jealous. And Marlon says, maybe I wouldn't act like this if you wasn't trying to steal my girlfriend. And Pops yells from the crowd, how could you go after your brother's girlfriend? And the crowd is like, yeah. And D yells, because he's a dog. And Shawn says, ain't nobody tried to steal your girl, Marlon. All I did was help her get into her apartment when she lost her keys. You're crazy. And Marlon snaps. He says, hey, look, don't be calling me crazy. I'm not crazy. I hate when people call me crazy. You don't know me to be calling me crazy. Hey, Jerry, tell him stop calling me crazy before I go crazy. And Jerry says, Shawn, please refrain from calling your brother crazy. And this is when Shawn turns it up a notch. He starts cursing. He's like, man, blank him. You feel me? And Marlon says, mother blank, don't be cursing at me. And they just go at a big curse off. One of the funniest parts of the show. And Jerry says, Jasmine, just out of curiosity, do you find Shawn attractive? And Jasmine says, who wouldn't? I mean, he's handsome. He's a good dresser. He's in shape. And then Marlon comes back strong and says, all right, witch, we get the point. And Jerry says, if Marlon wasn't born, could you see yourself dating Shawn? And Jasmine says, definitely. And D screams from the crowd, that girl is nothing but trash. And Jasmine starts to act out of character. She says, no, this witch didn't. Look, you need to watch who you calling trash, Marsha Warfield. Of course, referring to the security guard on the show from Night Court, right? And Dee takes off her earrings and say, come on now. And Jasmine stands up and was about to charge Dee. But luckily, Marlon holds her back, right? And the crowd is going wild. Jerry, Jerry, Jerry. And Pop says, don't you be talking to Dee like that, you little skeezer. And Marlon says, hey. I don't be talking about your cockeyed fat wife. And Shawn says, hey, that's my mama you talking about. And Marlon says, oh, that's my mama too. Mama, I'm sorry. As he looks in the camera, right? And Marlon says, well, you can't disrespect my girl. I love her. And Shawn says, man, you only know her for 2 weeks. You had corn videos rented out longer than that. Look, Marlon, I don't want your girl. And Marlon says, look, you trying to act all innocent. You knew what you was doing. Walking around, brushing your teeth and washing up and using lotion. And Shawn says, look, don't get mad at me because I like to wash my ass. And the crowd says, ooh. Then Shawn say, I don't want her. And then Marlon says, look at him sounding all sweet. I don't want her. What, you too good for her? Maybe she not light enough. Yeah, sellout brothers on the next Jerry Springer. Yeah, color-struck brothers on the next Jerry Springer. And Shawn gets up and says, yeah, crazy brothers on the next Jerry Springer. I'm out of here. And Marlon gets triggered because he's called them crazy again, right? And he gets up and does a jumping karate kick on Shawn. And then they get into a scuffle, right? And we see Steve and the crew, of course, trying to break it up. Marlon's even biting on the security, right? And then Shawn gets closer for a pinpoint hit, right, to square up with him, right? And Shawn throws this weak feminine punch that didn't land, and Marlon goes hiding behind Jerry and says, yeah, hit me now. And then Shawn does the unthinkable, right? He goes and grabs Jasmine's hair. Couldn't believe it, right? So Marlon grabs Jerry's hair, right? It was a crazy incident. While this is happening, the other two, Lester and Dexter, they're fighting too, right? We can't forget about that, right? And then now, right, Jerry always ends his shows with a final thought. I forgot to mention that in the beginning, right? Now, the final thought consists of like thoughts on the specific topic of the show to make it seem like he actually helped and he actually gives a damn. He really doesn't, though, And the final thought on this particular episode, and I quote from Jerry Springer. He says, today we see several types of brotherly love. Some brothers express their love by strangulation, others by stealing their sibling's girlfriend. Now we see some of these ways is wrong, but others may say it's right. But one thing for sure, I'm glad I'm the only child. Now, while all this is happening, right, Dee has a sign saying, call me, because she's single. Right? And Pop's got a shirt promoting his diner, right? And Steve and the crew is pulling them both off stage, right? And this leads to Pops taking the mic from Jerry and performing his legendary song from the group The Temp Tones, of course. My Love Goes Bang Bang Bang. Do you guys remember the song? Because Rants will sing it. Okay, I see you want Rants to sing it. What's that sound that go in the night? The sound I hear when I'm holding you tight. Ooh, it's my bell, baby, you just rang. It's my love going bang, bang, bang. When my love goes bang, bang, bang. You better run for cover, you sweet little thing. Come on now, legendary. Don't worry, we're gonna do a whole episode on the Temp Tones. You don't even gotta worry about that, right? And now we see Marlon and Shawn backstage with the wounds, of course. And Shawn says, damn, Marlon, I can't believe you attacked me on TV. And Marlon says, I told you not to call me crazy. And Shawn says, my fault. I'm sorry. I should have, told you I was over Jasmine's apartment that night and whatnot. And Marlon says, yeah, you cool and whatnot. I was just jealous. I'm always jealous when it comes to Jasmine and whatnot. And then he adds on, well, I guess she's all mine now, And then we see Jasmine is sitting on Jerry Springer's lap, hitting him with the same game she hit Shawn, telling him, I don't know what to do, Jerry. I lost my keys and now I'm locked out of my dressing room. Of course, and now Marlon takes the L, right? But this girl was for everybody. The only person that didn't get any was Marlon. But at least we got to sing on this episode, right? That's all that matters, right? Like and subscribe. Randumb Rants.